Hi, I'm Ryan from RTINGS.com. Today we'll be doing a review of the ASUS ProArt Display PA278CV. We'll be evaluating it on our standardized test bench to see how it performs and if you should buy it. This monitor is the successor to 2020's ProArt PA278QV, and they are very similar. They're both 27-inch 1440p IPS panels with a 75Hz refresh rate. The biggest difference between these two models comes from their connectivity options, with the newer model getting rid of the DVI port and adding in a USB-C port for use with modern laptops. The ProArt is a good entry-level display for media creators, and it also features a few gaming features for your downtime, which we'll talk about in the review. The new ProArt shares a lot of the same design language with its predecessor, featuring a sleek-looking design without any gamer-oriented accents, so it fits in well in a professional setting. It also has a physical ruler built into the bottom bezel, which can be useful for print editing. In addition to the physical ruler, you can also use the on-screen display to add a virtual overlay in several different print formats, which can also be helpful. The stand supports the monitor well and has a wide range of ergonomic adjustments. It has a thinner, more polished-looking stand than the previous generation with a narrower swivel range, though this shouldn't really be an issue since it is still a very wide range. There's a good range of inputs with an HDMI port as well as 2 display ports and a USB-C port. One of the display ports serves as a video out port for daisy-chaining monitors together. However, during our testing, this feature was not working. It's possible the port on our unit was defective, since we have not seen too many reports from users about having the same issue. If you have this monitor and can use the daisy-chaining feature, let us know in the comments. The USB-C port can do DisplayPort Alt mode as well as 65-watt power delivery and data transfer to your PC from the 4 built-in USB 3.0 ports. Now, let's take a look at the tests. We'll start with the contrast. A high contrast ratio is important if you use the monitor in the dark for deep dark scenes. Like most monitors, this one has an IPS type panel. This type of panel offers mediocre contrast, which means blacks will tend to look gray in a dark environment. Local dimming is a feature that controls the brightness of individual zones of the backlight. This allows for much deeper dark scenes, which can be useful when mastering content with particularly dark sections, since the backlight can turn off behind dark objects. As a result, the overall contrast can be boosted. The ProArt PA278CV does not have a local dimming feature to help improve contrast. Now, a high peak brightness is important either in a bright room to counteract glare, or if you want brighter highlights and a more impactful image. This monitor has great brightness in SDR, getting more than bright enough to overcome glare in almost any room setup. Also important for a bright room is good reflection handling. The ProArt has a hazy screen coating that helps to diffuse reflections and reduce their intensity. Overall, bright rooms shouldn't be an issue at all. A potential downside of a hazy coating is if it causes small details like text to appear grainy. Text clarity is also impacted by a bunch of factors though, like the subpixel arrangement. Overall, it's decent as you can see in these images. The screen coating doesn't have much of an impact. The top photo is with Windows ClearType, which helps diagonal lines look more clear. Without ClearType in the bottom image, it's alright, but does lack some subpixel detail. Good viewing angles are important to ensure details at the far sides of the screen don't look washed out. This monitor has great viewing angles both horizontally and vertically, so you shouldn't have any significant color shifting at the edges of the screen, which is great when doing precise color work. An overall uniform screen brightness and color is important when color grading or editing to avoid distracting areas that are overly dark or bright. This does vary between units, but we expect the PA278CV we bought to be about typical. The overall screen has a very similar brightness, which is great and shouldn't be an issue. The black uniformity on our unit is mediocre. There's backlight bleed in the top right corner and clouding throughout. This does change from unit to unit quite a bit, so keep in mind that yours could be better or worse than ours. Accuracy in the standard sRGB color space is important as it's the standard for computer use. This monitor has a specific sRGB color mode, which is excellent as it clamps the colors for accuracy and to avoid an oversaturated image. It has excellent out-of-the-box accuracy with almost no perceptible issues with color accuracy or white balance, which is great if you don't have the tools to calibrate it yourself. If you want to take full advantage of this monitor and display vivid colors in a wider color space, like Adobe RGB, then the ProArt PA278CV is a good choice. It has perfect coverage of the widely used sRGB color space and a respectable coverage of the Adobe RGB color space. If you want an even better image in Adobe RGB, then you might want to consider a monitor with a more complete coverage of that color space, since green and cyan are fairly undersaturated. A high refresh rate is important for gaming. It allows the image to be drawn on the screen faster, which makes it more responsive. And if the monitor supports variable refresh rates, then you can get a smooth experience without tearing regardless of the changing frame rate. The ProArt has a respectable refresh rate of 75 Hz and supports FreeSync compatibility over both DisplayPort and HDMI, as well as G-Sync compatibility over DisplayPort. The VRR does have a lower limit of 48 Hz, so any frame rate below that will introduce some tearing. When playing video games, a fast response time is important for the clearest image without distracting blur. The ProArt PA278CV has a surprisingly good response time for a monitor not specialized in gaming. It has a minimal blur trail with no overshoot, with the trace-free setting set to 40. If the frame rate drops when you're gaming, then luckily the response time is still good. Stick to the 40 overdrive setting for the best result regardless of the frame rate. There's a little overshoot, but it's unlikely to be an issue since 60 Hz is very close to its maximum refresh rate of 75 Hz, so there isn't much of a difference in performance. If you really want the clearest image when playing fast-paced games, then black frame insertion or backlight strobing features are useful to reduce blur caused by the persistence of the image during a full frame. The 2021 ASUS ProArt can flicker the backlight at 75 Hz only. You also can't use black frame insertion when adaptive sync is enabled, so you do need to make the trade-off between extra clarity and responsiveness when changing frame rates. The BFI setting is called Rapid Rendering, and it has two options, Normal or Advanced. Both settings limit the brightness considerably, and the image has a lot of strobe crosstalk and image duplication, so it's not very useful. Keep in mind that the score for the BFI is just based on the range at which it works and not the actual performance. Now, a low input lag is important for a responsive feel when playing video games, and despite not being geared towards gaming, the ProArt has an excellent input lag. It's slower than competing higher refresh rate gaming monitors, but it's no slouch either. So, this brings us to the main question. Should you buy this monitor? Well, firstly, it's certainly a good option for content creators and media professionals working in the sRGB color space. It has great out-of-the-box color accuracy, as well as USB-C connectivity and some useful screen overlays for different print sizes. It has great viewing angles with good brightness and reflection handling, which is great for office work. Because it's geared towards media professionals, it is a little more on the expensive side considering its features. The previous year's model, the PA278QV, is very similar in almost every way. It has extremely similar performance with a slightly different stand and no USB-C or daisy chaining features. However, if you don't need these features, then just go for whichever of the two you can find for cheaper. Another monitor worth considering if you plan to potentially work in the Adobe RGB color space is the Gigabyte M27Q. It has near perfect coverage of the Adobe RGB color space, as well as a very impressive factory calibrated sRGB mode, which does a great job of clamping the color space accurately. It also features a USB-C port, as well as a built-in KVM switch if you have a multi-PC setup. It sports a 170 Hz refresh rate, 10-bit color depth, and HDR compatibility. It also tends to be a fair bit cheaper than the ProArt series. It's an option that's worth keeping in mind, but it does have a few flaws, like worse ergonomics and a BGR subpixel layout which affects text clarity. For more info, you can check out the video we made on the M27Q.